Democracy is rule by the people. In a democracy, the people govern themselves. This is usually organized through voting, either directly on policy or on candidates who will serve as representative lawmakers. The alternative to democracy is a system where the people do not rule, but instead a smaller number of political elites. In the modern world, democracy is regarded as a sacred value. Even the opponents of democracy attempt to portray themselves as its greatest advocates. Donald Trump pretends to crusade against a fraudulent, undemocratic election. North Korea calls itself the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The fact that autocrats see the need to pretend to support democracy tells us a great deal about the almost divine status of this value. People treat democracy as if it were a good in itself. Democracy is a good, but it is not a good in itself. It is good for a number of reasons. It is these reasons that I wish to make clear. Our support for democracy must be founded on good reasons. Understanding that democracy is desirable is not good enough. We must understand why democracy is desirable. So why should we support democracy? Here one will find some of the reasons. One reason concerns the corrupting nature of power. Too much power corrupts people. Anyone who has taken as much as a glimpse at dictatorial leaders knows it. People so easily become monsters who will eagerly commit any depravity or inhumanity, if doing so helps them to preserve their power. People so easily refuse to abandon power, even when massive incompetence and constant failure make it more than clear that they should. Even when they have massive power, such great influence sparks in them only a desperate craving for even more. Power corrupts us. Too much power makes people do terrible things and stupid things. Democracy prevents this by distributing power evenly and subjecting it to regulation. When power is concentrated, it goes to the head very quickly, and horrors follow. Democracy distributes power in a way that ensures nobody has too much power. Power is shared. Nobody possesses enough of it to become as corrupted as many autocrats are. Democracy distributes and regulates power in a way that makes it far less likely to corrupt people into doing horrible things. Democracy is the sharing of power. The more power is shared, the less concentrated it is. Concentrated power corrupts. By preventing the concentration of power in the hands of a few, we can prevent their corruption and the terrible decisions that follow. Self-government means less hierarchy. While hierarchy is sometimes necessary, it is so easily turned into a tool of oppression. Self-government prevents the development of a massive autocratic hierarchy that is very easily modified into an apparatus of massive oppression. The corrupting effects of power make this transition from a benevolent hierarchy into a brutal tyranny not just easy, but perhaps most disturbingly, deeply enticing. Democracy is also good because it encourages political thought and involvement in one's society. Democracy encourages people to consider and contemplate political and philosophic matters. This is good because it is intellectually enhancing. It helps us to identify our interests and realize them. It helps to free us from the destructive dogma and infectious ignorance that prevents such a desirable identification and realization. Democracy enriches society by encouraging thought and discarding dogma. It doesn't always do this perfectly, but it does it a great deal better than the alternatives. Such an enrichment is something from which we all benefit immensely. Democracy encourages the questioning of power. It encourages us to criticize and consider. Such things aid us massively in both identifying and realizing our interests. Democracy encourages discourse and debate about ideas, which helps to enhance our ideas. Discourse and debate which privileges good ideas and hinders bad ideas. Discourse and debate which ensures that all ideas have been subject to criticism and consideration. Democracy inspires discourse and debate which helps to strengthen good ideas and discredit bad ones. Ideas are subject to great criticism and consideration because democracy comes with masses of conflicting ideas and viewpoints. In autocracy, the far smaller number of people in power and the greater ideological unity amongst those people means ideas are far less likely to be criticized and challenged. Democracy encourages criticism, consideration, discourse, and debate, which privileges good ideas and hinders bad ideas. Democracy encourages political and philosophical thought. It does this by making such thought overtly everyone's business. Democracy as a societal norm represents the ultimate validation of everyone's capacity to engage in political and philosophical thought. In doing so, it encourages such thought. It encourages consideration and contemplation, debate and discourse, from which our ideas and understandings can benefit massively. Democracy gets more minds involved in politics. It better incites the human capacity for thought. Democracy can also give people a perception of power that can prevent deeply destructive feelings of powerlessness, helplessness, and hopelessness. Such sentiments can cause massive harm to the individual and the society if they get out of control. Democracy gives a very real perception of power, which can help to prevent the development of such sentiments. Democracy can help to prevent people from feeling disconnected from the government and alienated from its decisions. Democracy can help to prevent a dividing and conflict-orientated us versus them dynamic. It creates a unity between people and government by making the people the government. Also notable is the all-affected principle. People should have a say in decisions that impact them. This statement aligns with the most basic notions of fairness. Autocracy is more or less inseparable from the idea that the people are too stupid to govern themselves. Someone with such disdain for the people should never be given power over them. Autocracy is born out of and naturally reinforces the idea that the people are an inferior lesser. A flock of idiotic sheep to be led. Cruelty and brutality naturally follow from the disdain for the people that autocracy is founded on and inevitably cultivates. As a sentient being, I want to promote respect for sentience. As a being who can suffer, I want to propagate empathy and compassion. Autocracy is contrary to these goals because it paves the way for cruelty by dehumanizing the people, who inevitably come to be regarded as mindless creatures that lack the intelligence to govern themselves. Autocracy treats the people like idiots who cannot govern themselves, idiots to be ruled over. In doing so, it dehumanizes them and lays the groundwork for cruelty. The hideousness of autocracy is itself an argument for democracy. Democracy prevents the development of the looking down dynamic that is inseparable from autocracy. The dynamic that dehumanizes the people by treating them as an idiotic lesser, mindless sheep to be ruled. The dynamic that paves the way for so much hideousness. Democracy helps to keep the powerful in line. It subjects those with power to regulation by the will of the people. It is sometimes said that any form of government is regulated by the will of the people. Even the dictatorship can be overthrown. This is true, but it is much easier to overthrow someone at the ballot box than in a civil war. It requires far less devotion. Leaders who are regulated by the right to vote are far better regulated than leaders who are regulated only by the citizenry's capacity to launch a successful revolution. It is far easier to show disapproval through a vote than it is to show disapproval through a successful insurgency. Democracy is a much more user-friendly form of government regulation. For one, it doesn't tend to involve getting shot to pieces, as the more militaristic option often does. Such a threat is very real, and it stifles the desire to regulate power in such violent ways. It is much easier to abandon your disapproval when you are staring down the barrel of a gun. Voting, meanwhile, can provide a far safer, easier, and more effective means of government regulation. Democracy isn't an appeal to the majority. Democracy isn't founded on the idea that the people are right. Very often they aren't. The many strong arguments for democracy have nothing to do with the majority being right. These arguments concern the fundamental benefits of democracy, not blind faith in the views of the masses. Mob rule can be an issue. To some extent, it can be an issue in any society and can't be entirely fixed by any system. Even without mob rule, we just get minority rule, which is often no better, and sometimes even worse. We can try to prevent this with a strong constitution that protects individual rights, and a propagated mob sentiment that favours those rights. The mob being philosophically knowledgeable can also help a great deal. Most of the shortcomings of rule by the people can be solved by the development of a more politically and philosophically aware populace. The kind of populace that democracy itself helps to create by inciting discourse and debate, encouraging consideration and contemplation, and overtly making politics the business of everyone. Democracy should not be a sacred value. It should not be supported out of dogma. Democracy should be a rational value. There are good reasons to support democracy.